The Voynich Manuscript is a book written by hand that is reliably dated to the early part of the 15th century.
The world's most mysterious book was never supposed to be read. For more than 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript sat locked behind museum glass, filled with impossible symbols, strange diagrams, and plants that don't exist anywhere on Earth. The world's best cryptographers tried to decode it. Medieval experts failed. Military codebreakers failed. Even AI systems reportedly couldn't fully understand it. Until now. And when researchers finally pieced together the translation, the reaction wasn't excitement. It was silence. Because according to leaked reports, the manuscript doesn't describe fantasy, religion, or medicine. It describes a system, a precise set of instructions tied to consciousness, the human body, and something the writers believed could survive death itself. Before we expose what they found hidden inside these pages, hit like and subscribe, because some people believe this manuscript was buried for centuries, for a reason. The Voynich Manuscript was written in the early 1400s, filled with over 100 pages of coded text and bizarre illustrations no historian could explain. But the decoded sections allegedly reveal knowledge completely out of place for medieval Europe. Diagrams of biological processes, references to stars behaving unnaturally, and warnings about a cycle humanity was never meant to interrupt. And the deeper researchers translated, the darker the message became. The book that should not exist somewhere, in a climate-controlled vault, at Yale University's Benecker Rare Book and Manuscript Library, a book sits behind glass. It is not especially large. It is not especially beautiful. It is 240 worn pages of medieval vellum, covered edge to edge, in handwritten text and strange illustrations, sealed inside a language no human being has ever identified, mapped, or spoken out loud in the entire recorded history of civilization. For over 600 years, it sat in silence, indifferent to every attempt to open it. Think about what that means for a moment. Not just decades of failure, 6 centuries. Every generation of scholars since the Italian Renaissance has taken a run at this thing. Codebreakers, who cracked Nazi communications during World War II, turned their full professional attention to it and came back empty. Linguists brought statistical tools that could fingerprint the grammar of a dead language from 50 words. Cryptographers applied techniques that had broken every encryption system human intelligence had ever built. Artificial intelligence systems scanned it for patterns. Every single one of them failed. The book simply sat there, patient and sealed, giving nothing away. And then, in early 2025, everything changed. A team of AI researchers made an announcement that sent shockwaves through academic circles. Using advanced neural networks trained simultaneously across hundreds of languages, they had done what everyone for 6 centuries had said was impossible. They had begun to read the Voynich Manuscript, not guessing at letters, not pattern-matching symbols, actually reading it. The question is what they found. We are getting there. But first, you need to understand what this book actually is, because the stakes of cracking it are not what most people assume. The Voynich Manuscript gets its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912 from a Jesuit college in Frascati, Italy, where it had been sitting in storage, largely ignored, for decades. But the book itself is dramatically older. Carbon dating places its vellum pages firmly in the early 15th century, somewhere between 1404 and 1438. It was almost certainly composed during the Italian Renaissance, a period of discovery, scientific awakening, and relentless human ambition. A moment in history when artists, scientists, physicians, and mystics were all operating in the same rooms, sharing ideas, pushing every boundary the church had told them was fixed. And yet this book follows none of the rules of that era or any era before or since. The writing runs left to right, the way English does, but the alphabet used, what researchers now call Voynich, contains between 25 and 30 unique characters that match no known writing system on Earth. Not Latin, not Greek, not Arabic, not Hebrew, not any form of shorthand, cipher notation, or coded alphabet ever found in any other manuscript anywhere in the world. Here is the thing that makes this genuinely strange. Not just academically interesting, but actually strange. The words formed by those characters follow linguistic patterns that are deeply consistent with a real, living language. There is rhythm. There is repetition in exactly the right places. There is structure. Statistical analysis of the text has confirmed, repeatedly, that it follows Zipf's law, the mathematical distribution of word frequencies found in every natural human language ever studied. Whatever this is, it behaves like real speech, and yet no linguist has ever recognized a single word. It was as if someone had sat down with limitless patience and invented an entirely new language specifically for this one book, constructed it carefully enough that it would pass every statistical test for authenticity for 600 years, then buried the key somewhere no one would ever find it. The question that follows from that, the one nobody had a comfortable answer to before 2025, is why? Why would anyone do that? Why go to such elaborate, extraordinary lengths to make sure that what you wrote could never be read? We are about to find out. But the pictures deserve their own chapter first. The illustrations. The illustrations are just as strange as the text, and in some ways they are more troubling. There are drawings of plants throughout the manuscript's botanical sections, dozens of them rendered with a careful precision, common to 15th century herbals and medical pharmacopoeias. But not one of them has ever been identified by a professional botanist, not as a known species, not as a regional variant of a known species, not even as a distant evolutionary relative of anything in the documented plant kingdom. Some appear to be hybrids of real species, the root system of one plant fused with the leaf structure of another, topped by the flower of a third, combined into a single organism that follows no known botanical or evolutionary logic, as if the illustrator was describing something that existed somewhere else, or perhaps in a time, a location, or a layer of reality that our taxonomy has never catalogued. The astronomical sections contain circular diagrams showing star formations that do not match anything in medieval astronomy. Researchers have spent decades trying to align them with known star charts from the 14th and 15th centuries, from Islamic astronomical traditions that Renaissance scholars were actively studying, from recovered Greek sources. Nothing aligns. The stars are in the wrong positions. The relationships between them do not correspond to any known constellation tradition from any culture in any era. And then there are the bathing scenes. Entire sections of the manuscript are given over to illustrations of naked women in elaborate pools and channels, connected by intricate systems of tubes and pipes that feed into and out of each other in complex patterns. The women appear calm, purposeful, completely unsurprised by their surroundings. Whatever is happening in those pools does not look like bathing for hygiene, which was common and well documented in medieval medicine. It looks like a procedure, a ceremony, a process with a specific intended outcome that the surrounding text was presumably describing in detail. For centuries, the theories piled up: hoax, secret medical guide, alchemical manual, hidden religious text from a sect the Inquisition had hunted into extinction. Nobody could say, because nobody could read it. The bathing women, it turns out, were the section that made researchers most uncomfortable once the AI began to translate. But we are not there yet. You need to understand how the decipherment actually happened first, because the method is as extraordinary as what it found. The machine that said Hebrew. The real turning point began at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, where researchers Greg Kondrak and Bradley Hauer applied an AI technique called algorithmic decipherment to the manuscript's text. Their approach was fundamentally unlike anything previously attempted. Earlier researchers had picked a candidate language and looked for matches one at a time, guessing and checking decade after decade. Kondrak and Hauer did something different. They fed their AI model samples from over 380 languages simultaneously, all at once, letting the machine search the entire documented space of human language at a single pass. They were asking it a question no human researcher had the bandwidth to ask properly. Does this text feel, statistically and structurally, like anything in the entire history of human communication? The machine said yes. It said Hebrew. That is the moment that stopped Kondrak cold, right there at a workstation in Edmonton, looking at a result he had not expected. Specifically, the AI identified a pattern suggesting the manuscript was written in encoded Hebrew, but with a second layer of encryption built on top of it. The letters within each word appear to have been rearranged alphabetically before being written down, a technique researchers call alphagrams. So the word you see on the page is not the word. It is a scrambled version of the word, the letters sorted into a new alphabetical order, like a systematic anagram, following strict rules that apply consistently throughout the entire manuscript. 2 encryption layers, a new alphabet concealing a scrambled language. Once researchers applied that decoding logic, over 80% of the resulting words appeared in standard Hebrew dictionaries. That figure should stop you for a second. 80%. In a text that had resisted every decryption attempt for 6 centuries. The first full sentence the AI translated reportedly read, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people." Simple, almost shockingly ordinary. The kind of sentence you might find in a household account book, not something buried under 600 years of impenetrable code. But that sentence is what cracked everything open. From that single foothold sentence, the AI began cascading outward, identifying repeating grammatical patterns throughout the rest of the text, anchoring itself chapter by chapter across all 240 pages. It decoded herbal mixture references in the botanical sections. It unlocked the astrological notation in the astronomical charts. And then it reached the sections surrounding the bathing women. That is where the researchers stopped answering press inquiries. What was actually in there? By 2025, more advanced neural networks, the kind trained on visual context rather than raw text alone, took the Alberta findings substantially further. These systems could analyze the writing and the illustration simultaneously, reading the way a trained historian would, as a unified document where words and pictures work together to communicate a single, coherent set of ideas. Here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. What the AI uncovered in the section surrounding the bathing women was not what anyone expected. The decoded text, alongside those famous illustrations, did not describe hygienic practices. It did not describe medicinal bathing, which was well documented and entirely ordinary in 15th century medical literature. The language decoded from ancient Hebrew pointed to something in a different category entirely. The category was ritual pharmacology, specifically the The decoded passages described precise formulations involving plant-derived substances. Administered through procedures, the illustrations were apparently diagramming for outcomes that have no counterpart anywhere in the official medical history of the 15th century. The procedures were sequential. The formulas were specific. This was not allegory. This was a manual. The botanical sections confirmed it. Plant mixtures and preparations decoded into formulas that blended known herbal remedies from the medieval pharmacopoeia with compounds that have no historical counterpart in any documented medical tradition. Researchers who had spent their careers in medieval medicine looked at the decoded formulas and could not place them, not as known remedies, not as extinct variants of known remedies, not as anything with a name. Were these plants that once existed and are now gone? Were the formulas symbolic, representing something other than literal chemistry? Or had someone, 6 centuries ago, documented real pharmacological knowledge that modern science has never encountered? Nobody could agree. The debate was quiet at first. Then there were the ritual sections. Among the decoded passages were apparent references to angelic hierarchies, incantations, and operational ritual instructions that read less like medieval theology and more like a step-by-step procedural manual, not the vague, comfortingly metaphorical spiritual language common in medieval religious manuscripts, where everything difficult softens into allegory. These passages were specific, sequential, the kind of text that reads like it was written by someone describing procedures they had personally performed. One researcher described the decoded material as knowledge that feels like it should not exist, detailed, operational, practical knowledge for things that have no innocent explanation. And here is the specific question that stopped the press briefings cold. The decoded content sat at the intersection of pharmacological procedure and ritual practice in a way that suggested the author did not consider those two things separate disciplines. Whatever was happening in those pools, it was both medical and ceremonial at once, a category that has no name in any living academic tradition. The author knew this. The author knew exactly what they were writing, and they encrypted it in 2 languages under a constructed alphabet and hoped the world would never reach it. Here is what makes that choice so specific and so deliberate. The ritual sections were not scattered randomly through the manuscript. They were positioned alongside the botanical formulas, alongside the astronomical charts, as if the 3 disciplines were meant to be used together, not separately, together as a system. A system for doing something the author clearly understood and clearly believed should never be in the wrong hands. Marcy had tried to reach it. He had sat alone with those pages in Prague, scribbling in corners, getting closer than he would ever publicly admit. He failed. But what he left behind, hidden in a place nobody looked for over 300 years, tells us something even stranger about how many people across history may have suspected what was in this book and chose not to say so out loud. The ink that never dies. While the AI was working on the language, scientists at a separate institution were applying a completely different technology to the physical pages, multispectral imaging. This method uses ultraviolet and infrared light, wavelengths invisible to the human eye, to reveal details hidden beneath faded ink and erased writing. Medieval ink contains iron. Iron bonds permanently with vellum at the molecular level during the drying process. Even if ink fades over centuries or is deliberately scraped away, the ghost of every letter written hundreds of years ago remains embedded in the parchment itself. You cannot truly erase medieval iron ink. The parchment remembers it permanently, glowing under the right kind of light. Think about the implications of that for a moment. Every attempt to remove something from this manuscript would have been futile. Every secret addition, every marginal note, every scribbled attempt at decipherment was preserved, whether the person who wrote it wanted it preserved or not. Yale University's Voynich Book and Manuscript Library had allowed a team from the Lazarus Project to scan select pages back in 2014. Those scans sat unprocessed for nearly a decade, stored on servers nobody was prioritizing. When researcher Roger Easton of the Rochester Institute of Technology reprocessed them in 2024 using new image enhancement tools, he sent the results to scholar Lisa Fagan Davis. Davis, a paleographer and the executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, was at her workstation late one evening, running through the enhanced scans page by page. She reached the first page of the manuscript and stopped moving entirely. In the lower corner, invisible under normal light, invisible to every researcher who had examined that page over the previous century, were 3 slim columns of faint writing. One column showed the Roman alphabet from A to Z, written out carefully and completely. Another displayed Voynich's characters alongside corresponding Roman letters, a direct mapping of the 2 writing systems. The third repeated the Roman alphabet shifted by exactly 1 letter position, the classic structure of a substitution cipher key. She stopped moving because she recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to Johannes Marcus Marci, a 17th-century Czech physician, scientist, and imperial diplomat who owned the manuscript between 1662 and 1665 before sending it to the Jesuit polymath Athanasius Kircher in Rome. In his covering letter to Kircher, Marci had named Roger Bacon, the 13th-century English friar, as the probable author. He had written that the manuscript had once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who had reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it, an extraordinary sum, the kind of price you pay for something you believe contains real and irreplaceable knowledge. Marci had apparently been quietly working on the cipher himself, in secret, scribbling his attempts in the corner of the first page where no one would notice them, working alone on a problem that had already defeated better-resourced scholars. He never succeeded, but his hidden annotations confirmed something that skeptics had questioned for years. This was not a modern forgery. The book's physical and historical chain of custody was unbroken, continuous, and verifiable from at least the early 17th century backward. And here is the part that nobody has fully answered. Marci had access to imperial scientific networks, to Kircher, to some of the most connected intellectual figures in 17th century Europe. If he was quietly working on this cipher in secret, rather than through his scholarly networks, the question is not whether he was trying to hide the fact that he was working on it. The question is whether he was hiding the fact that he was getting close. The debate nobody wanted to have. There is a conversation happening quietly in academic circles that does not make it into public headlines. It is not a debate about what the manuscript says. That translation is ongoing. This is a different debate and a more uncomfortable one. It is a debate about whether knowing what the manuscript says is actually a good thing. Some researchers argue that the manuscript's true value has always been the journey it inspired. For over a century, the effort to decode it pushed scientists, historians, linguists, cryptographers, and AI researchers to collaborate across disciplines in ways that produced genuine breakthroughs. Techniques developed specifically in the attempt to crack the Voynich manuscript have direct applications in linguistics research, medical text analysis, and natural language processing. The book challenged humanity for 6 centuries. Humanity grew to meet it. Perhaps these scholars say The book's real gift was never the knowledge inside it. It was the questions it forced us to ask. Others are not so reassuring, and here is why their position is harder to dismiss than it sounds. If the decoded content contains real pharmacological formulas, real ritual procedures, or real operational instructions that were encrypted by someone who understood precisely how dangerous they were, then releasing that information into the world without fully understanding its context could have consequences that are genuinely unpredictable. The University of Chicago's Robert Richards once compared the manuscript to a form of knowledge so alien to normal human understanding that fully grasping it could reshape the way people think about the nature of reality. That comparison felt abstract when he made it. It feels considerably less abstract now. Ask yourself this: why would someone capable of inventing a new alphabet, writing in a second language, and scrambling every single word in that language before committing it to expensive vellum, why would that person go to all that trouble? Fear of persecution is one answer, and probably a real one in 15th century Italy. But persecution from what, exactly? Encoding herbal medicine or even alchemy would not have required this level of construction. This level of layering implies the author believed the knowledge itself was the threat, not the author, the knowledge. And here is the simplest, most unsettling interpretation of all. What if the person who wrote this book was not trying to preserve something for a future reader? What if they were trying to bury it permanently, in a code they believed no future technology would ever break? What if the manuscript was never a library waiting to be opened, but a tomb designed to stay sealed? If that is true, then whoever wrote it made a calculation about what level of encryption was sufficient to protect the world from what they had written. They chose an invented alphabet combined with a scrambled ancient language, and they were right for 600 years. They were not counting on neural networks trained across 380 languages at once. What happens now? More than 600 years ago, someone sat in silence with a quill, dark iron ink, and sheets of carefully crafted vellum, writing a message they never wanted the world to easily understand. Instead of using any known language, they created an entirely new alphabet from scratch, a system so complex that no linguist, historian, or codebreaker could fully unravel it for centuries. Hidden inside were scrambled Hebrew phrases, strange plants that don't exist anywhere on Earth, star charts that match no known sky, and mysterious scenes of women performing rituals or procedures unlike anything recorded in human history. Then they locked it all behind layers of encryption so advanced that generation after generation failed to crack it. Scholars tried. Cryptographers tried. Even modern computers struggled. And for over 6 centuries, the Voynich Manuscript remained one of humanity's greatest unsolved mysteries. But now, something has changed. The manuscript is still not fully decoded, and that is the part people need to understand. Artificial intelligence has only opened the door. It hasn't fully stepped inside yet. So far, researchers have managed to translate only small portions of the 240-page text, including fragments of botanical formulas, ritual passages, and strange astronomical notes. Every new translation is being reviewed carefully, verified repeatedly, and in some cases, quietly withheld, while experts decide how much should actually be released to the public. Because this is no longer just a historical puzzle. What researchers are uncovering doesn't fit neatly into any existing academic category. Conversations are reportedly happening between experts at institutions like the Beinecke Library, the University of Alberta, and the University of Chicago about how these discoveries should be shared and whether the public version of the story should differ from the complete findings. That hesitation alone is unusual. In modern academia, researchers race to publish first. They rarely stop and pause unless what they've found carries serious implications. And that raises a chilling possibility. Whoever created the Voynich manuscript was not simply eccentric. This was someone with extraordinary intelligence and technical skill, someone fluent in multiple languages who also invented an entirely new one. They documented detailed botanical, astronomical, and ritual knowledge with the precision of a trained expert, then hid it behind a code designed to stay unreadable until technology advanced far beyond their own time. So the real mystery is no longer whether the manuscript can be translated. The real mystery is who wrote it. Was it a physician hiding forbidden medical knowledge from the church? A mystic protecting rituals too dangerous to reveal openly? Or someone operating in the space between science and spirituality, preserving ideas that the world simply had no framework to understand? Sometimes the world's most dangerous secrets are not hidden inside military bunkers or encrypted government servers. Sometimes they sit quietly inside a glass display case in a university library, passed by thousands of students and tourists every year without a second glance. A book written in an unknown alphabet, a message waiting centuries for the right machine to finally understand it. And now, that machine exists. The translations are continuing page by page, and somewhere within those mysterious bathing scenes, coded diagrams, and unpublished passages, the true meaning of the Voynich manuscript may finally be emerging.